Hello everybody and welcome back. I'm sorry that this video is coming out a couple days later than I originally wanted, but we were having some car trouble, and this is the type of car trouble that costs $800. And it means you have to go 2 days without a car and all your plans for the week change all of a sudden. So anyway, that fiasco is over. I'm back and I'm finally here to talk about my top 3 myths about the fertility awareness method. Specifically, I'm here to bust these myths, but I'm also here to bust the homophobic, misogynist, patriarchal assumptions that are right under the surface of these myths. But first of all, check out this coffee cup. This is actually my husband's. He's really into dinosaurs, has been since he was a kid. I made myself a homemade decaf vanilla latte because I deserve it. Anyhow, let's bust myth number 1. And myth number 1 is basically the assumption or the pre-misconception that the fertility awareness method is only for those heterosexual, monogamous couples who are trying to have a baby. So under the surface of this assumption is another assumption, the assumption that fertility means reproduction. And if you read Taking Charge of Your Fertility, and by the way, if you want to enter to win your own copy of that book, I would check out, and I think in this corner, I'm going to have a little card flash out, but I would check out the first video I made for this series. I'll have it linked below. Check out that video if you haven't seen it already, to see how you can enter to win your own copy of Taking Charge, Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. Anyway, in that book and in The Garden of Fertility, which is another book about the fertility awareness method, both authors differentiate fertility from reproduction. Because reproduction, within the word reproduction, you get the assumption that babies are going to be made, right? Whereas fertility just refers to the overall health of your reproductive organs. So if you were born with a uterus and ovaries and a vagina and whatnot, a cervix and fallopian tubes and all that, it's the overall health of those organs, but also your whole endocrine system and hormonal system, right? So fertility does not necessarily equal reproduction. And so the fertility awareness method is not just for couples, monogamous heterosexual couples who are trying to have a baby. Monogamous, cisgendered, heterosexual couples. Let me clarify that. So another kind of underlying assumption underneath this myth is this idea of some sort of biological imperative to reproduce. And this is a case where science is being used to justify a person's misogyny and prejudices. Science, just like religion, can be used and misused to justify a society's horrible ideas. In the 19th century, you have scientific racism that kind of came up along with the idea of Darwinism and social Darwinism, and these racist, crazy white dudes, mostly in Europe and the United States, using evolution and Darwin's theory to justify white superiority, for example. Well, they also used it to justify things like misogyny and sexism against women, right? Women and femmes. So there's this idea that it's just natural for a person who is born with a uterus to want to procreate, to want to have children. And so if you don't want to have children, then there's something wrong with you, or you're immature, or you're underdeveloped, or insane or mentally unstable or selfish if you choose not to have children. And unfortunately, I would like to think that by the 21st century that these sorts of ideas wouldn't still be a problem, but they are. So I'm actually going to link below a really amazing video that Kellyanne Maddox made a while ago, like months ago. I hope she still has it up, but it's a video about her choice not to have children. And she doesn't talk about the reasons behind her choice because she doesn't need to justify anything. We're just a bunch of randos on the internet watching her videos, right? But she talks about kind of the complications about making that decision and being public about that decision, specifically as a cis woman. I believe she identifies as bisexual. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kellyanne, if you're watching. But as a cis woman, and the shit that she's gotten throughout her life, as she became public with that decision, and the specific pressures that people born with uteruses or people who are perceived as femme to be, or the pressures they go through to be motherly or to bear children, to procreate, right? So that's a really awesome video. I would recommend it to anybody, whether you're thinking of having children or not, or thinking of having more children or not. It's just really important to consider all sides of an issue and just respect people's decisions. So yeah, I'm gonna include that video below. Take a gander, it's worth it. But back to the fertility awareness method. So if we kind of get rid of this idea that there's some sort of biological imperative to reproduce, which is not founded on science and at its root and core is misogynist and homophobic, and if we get rid of this idea that fertility equates to reproduction, then the fertility awareness method, yes, it can be used by couples who are trying to conceive, whether they are heterosexual or not, whether they are monogamous or not, whatever. But it can also be used for birth control, which is how I use it. And I am in a monogamous, heteronormative relationship. But it can also be used to gauge your overall health. Because if you menstruate and if you have uterus and all that, your menstrual cycle can actually be a window into the bigger picture of your overall health. If you're experiencing issues with your menstrual cycle and issues with hormonal imbalances and stuff like that, that can also affect your mental health, your emotional health, and other aspects of your physical health, right? Like having a hypothyroid or some sort of thyroid issue can show up in your cycle and show up in your charts if you're using the fertility awareness method and charting your cycles. So yeah, fertility awareness is for everybody. It's also for the cisgendered men in our lives. Like my partner, he benefits from it too, and he has learned a lot from it too. And actually, I think maybe next week or sometime soon, I'm going to have him on here as part of the series, and we're going to have a chat, like an interview, and he's going to share about how he, as a cis straight man, has also benefited from the fertility awareness method. So be on the lookout for that. So we busted myth number 3. Yeah, I'm starting at 3 and working my way down. Myth number 2, and this one's a doozy. The assumption that the fertility awareness method is the same as natural family planning. Okay. Natural family planning and the fertility awareness method share a lot of things in common. The same methods of charting, the same signs of fertility that people use to gauge whether or not they are in the fertile part of their cycle or not. A lot of things in common. The main difference is the source of who is teaching the method, basically. Natural family planning is, as far as I know, the only purely acceptable form of birth control accepted by the official dogma of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, the Roman Catholic Church, in my experience and in my studies, is pretty patriarchal and pretty misogynist, and so any form of hormonal or barrier method birth control, meaning the pill, Nexplanon implant, any form of intrauterine device, and condoms or spermicide or diaphragms or anything like that is banned by the Catholic Church. If you've ever seen, what's that movie by Monty Python? Life, or what's it called? Somebody in the comments below, remind me what the name of this movie is, but they have this great song where the Catholic couple and the Catholic children are singing, "Every sperm is sacred, every sperm is great, if a sperm is wasted, God gets quite irate." So the idea that you're not allowed to spill and waste your sperm, right? So the assumption, like, God, there's so much going wrong in that dogma. First of all, it assumes that everyone is heterosexual, so they're homophobic, and they assume that people who are homosexual or queer in any way are choosing to be that way and choosing to sin only if they act upon their homosexuality. It's assuming that sex is only for reproduction, and there's plenty of evidence of animals, especially mammals, lions, dolphins, bonobos, different types of apes and the greater apes, all sorts of different species that all have been recorded displaying homosexual behavior. So if it's in the animal kingdom, why is it not considered natural among humans? Homophobia. But anyway, so it's assumption that all couples are heterosexual and heteronormative, and that's the only right way and correct way to have sex. And the only thing that really counts as sex is intercourse, penis and vagina. That's the only permittable form of sex. And no form of birth control or barrier method is allowed except for natural family planning. And under natural family planning, you basically abstain from sex, meaning intercourse, penis and vagina sex, until you are no longer fertile in your cycle, right? So for like basically the first half of your cycle, you're on your period, you might have a few safe days, and then you enter into your fertile phase, your follicular phase more or less, and you just abstain from sex. All forms of sex, I guess, because they're so prudish about it. But anyway, the fertility awareness method is secular. It is not dependent on or connected to any form of religious or spiritual institution. Anyone can practice it, no matter what your beliefs are. You can be atheist, you can be Catholic, you can be Protestant, you can be Muslim, you can be Jew, you can be Hindu, you can be Buddhist, you can be anything. You can believe in the big spaghetti monster. You can practice the fertility awareness method, because the fertility awareness method doesn't come with any of the religious dogma. It's secular, and it allows for the use of things like the barrier method. You can even start charting your cycles and practicing the method while you still are on hormonal birth control, or while you still have an IUD. My husband and I, for example, when it's during the fertile phase of my cycle, we use a barrier method, we use a condom. And then when I'm done with the fertile cycle and the coast is clear, we don't use a condom, and it's fine. So it allows for more flexibility because it doesn't come with all that religious grossness that natural family planning comes with. And also, the problem with natural family planning is oftentimes if you seek out a teacher for natural family planning, they might not allow you to take their class. The author of The Garden of Fertility, I can't remember her name right now, I'll have it pop up here. It's another book about the fertility awareness method. But the author, in her introduction to that book, talks about her frustrations. Her frustrations with hormonal birth control and how she was searching for a different option, a different way. And then she heard about natural family planning, but she tried to sign up for the classes, but the people wouldn't allow her to take the class because she was sexually active, but she wasn't married to her partner at the time. So they straight up refused to allow her to take the class because she didn't fit into their idea of what is right, basically. So, yeah. The fertility awareness method is not the same thing as natural family planning. And the frustrating thing is I've looked for resources online internationally, specifically Australia and Britain, but a lot of the websites I found, especially for Australia, used the two terms interchangeably, and I just wanted to pull my hair out. So, busting myth number 2. Fertility awareness method is not the same thing as natural family planning. The fertility awareness method is for everybody, not just Catholics. Okay, now, my number 1 myth, and this one's a doozy. Myth number 1 about the fertility awareness method. Let me drink some of this coffee. Okay, myth number 1. That the fertility awareness method is the same thing as the rhythm method. This one makes me so irate, but I get angry when people assume that fertility awareness is the same as the rhythm method, but in all honesty, before I really knew about it, I made the same assumption. It just comes from ignorance. So I know those of us who are menstruating and who grew up menstruating, we heard about this long ago age in a long ago time, in the time of our mothers or grandmothers or great-grandmothers or whatever, that the rhythm method was the only option for people to prevent pregnancy, which isn't true. Condoms have existed for a long time, but anyway, so we've all been raised with this fear, like, the rhythm method doesn't work, the rhythm method is a myth, the rhythm method, And it's true, the rhythm method does not work. And it does not work because it is a predictive method. Basically, the rhythm method is based on assumptions. And you know what happens when you assume? You make an ass of you and me. But really, it's based on the assumption that every one of your cycles is going to be the same and that you're going to ovulate at the same time every cycle. So you kind of guesstimate when you're going to be fertile, and you assume that you're going to be fertile the same days in every cycle after that, and that's why it fails. And dear God, I hope no one uses it now in the 21st century, in the year 2018. The rhythm method is predictive. Fertility awareness method is day by day. You're not making predictions about next cycle. You're not basing the current cycle on the past cycle. It is day by day. It takes into account the fact that cycles change, that life events happen that can affect your cycle. Stress happens. My cycles, just in the time that I've been charting, have varied from 28 days long to as short as 24 days long a couple times. I have ovulated on day 10 or 11 of my cycle, and I've also ovulated on day 14 or 15 of my cycle. And that makes a big difference if you're charting, especially if you're charting to prevent pregnancy. So yeah, the fertility awareness method makes no assumptions. It makes no predictions about your method. It is literally day by day. You are collecting data on yourself, right? And that is why it's effective. And it's even more effective as a form of birth control because it allows for the use of things like condoms, diaphragms, spermicide, right? There is no religious dogma preventing you from using those additional layers of protection, if you will, to prevent pregnancy. So yes, those are what I think are the top 3 myths about the fertility awareness method, myths about reproduction, myths about its effectiveness. And thank you for busting through those myths with me. And I think the next video, which I hope to have up this weekend, I'm actually going to take the camera and show you my current chart and kind of show you the basics of what charting looks like and what does it look like within a busy schedule. I know a lot of people are kind of daunted by the idea of charting, like taking your temperature every day and checking your fluid, blah. But really, taking your temperature and adding the information to your chart at the end of the day before you go to bed, it literally is like 5 or 10 minutes a day, tops. It's not that daunting, I promise. It's kind of daunting at the beginning before you get a handle on it, but really, 5 or 10 minutes a day, that's it. So yeah, I'm excited to share my chart. Actually, this chart has been one of the most clearest charts, like textbook looking kind of chart I've ever had, so I'm excited to share this one to give you a good idea of what the general rhythms of your cycle look like. Not the rhythm method, just the rhythms of your cycle. Okay, until next time, happy charting. Bye!